And so yes, well, thank you. Yes, so these are just kind of some closing remarks. Um, and thank you, everyone, for your continued participation and engagement. This was the 5th workshop on teaching NLP. The first was 2002, and then several years thereafter, and there's been a break of 8 years since the previous one. And so it's great to see such a positive response to this. I have been, while preparing for the workshop, reading quite a few of the previous papers from Teaching NLP, and it's really interesting how resilient they are. Actually, Jason is a good example of that, a paper from 2002, which offers a spreadsheet for doing backward forward, still available, still in use. I mean, that's almost 20 years, and that's really impressive. And it's a common feeling I had as I read papers from previous proceedings that they really do hold up well. And so the reason for mentioning that is that I think this is a reason for submitting to a workshop like this. There is a resilience to it, and I guess the only perplexing issue is that you don't necessarily get quite as many citations for work like that sometimes, perhaps because this workshop has not been, every year or things like that. But I think a lot of people are looking at these. That's what I realized. A lot of people mentioned to me, we're still using Jason's spreadsheet from 2002 and so forth. So that's just kind of a pitch for continuing to submit to this. This was planned as a 2-day event to inspire this kind of discussion and kind of community building. And hopefully that has been successful to some extent. And we have set up a number of communication channels, including a discussion list that's been mentioned a number of times. And that's, I think, hopefully going forward, going to be a place to talk about some of these kinds of issues about what we do going forward. And I know that Drago, who was here, I think, but may not be anymore, posted on our discussion list that he was interested in kind of coordinating maybe an effort to organize some way of sharing materials. And so if you're interested in that, please respond to his note in our discussion list. You can find links to the discussion list and various other, the YouTube channel and the Twitter account in our Jupyter book in the Jupyter book of the workshop. And so please do kind of stay in touch there. And I guess other things just to think about, a few remarks just about maybe the future, which can lead to the repository. One thing I would just like to encourage people to do, we didn't do it at this, or none of the organizers decided to do this at this workshop, but because we were having, or at NECL, because we were having this workshop. But it's become pretty common now to have these birds of a feather events at conferences. And I hosted one at Coling for Teaching NLP, which was really interesting. I learned a lot from that, which helped me in preparing for this. And I would really encourage any of you to consider leading one of those, because it's a great experience. And I think there's an opportunity at every subsequent event to do that. And so that's kind of a way to keep the energy going. The possibilities for a 6th workshop based on the interest here this time around are certainly, there's a strong case to be made for that. And then finally, I think a lot of interest has been expressed in this idea of a repository for sharing these materials that we either talk about or publish, or that we have and we use. And I guess I was hoping Drago would still be here because since he had kind of mentioned wanting to help coordinate something like that, it might be, I was hoping he could say a few words, but I think that might be a good sort of concluding discussion point here for us, just so we don't lose track of the idea. And so maybe we can turn the question back to you again, Jason, just as far as you obviously are committed to this idea of sharing materials. You have published at least 4 papers in this workshop. You have a 20-year-old spreadsheet that people are using. And so you've probably thought about this some. And what kind of advice, suggestions do you have about this?
So I've thought about this some in the context of resources, not just for teaching, but also for learning. So one question that I guess I have is whether this is just sort of a variety of teachers who secretly share materials among ourselves, so that nobody knows that I lifted my pretty picture on transformers from you. And just making nice graphical slides takes absolutely forever, and I would love to be able to save some of that duplicated effort. But I think it would be nice if we didn't just keep this a secret. Most of us put our slides online anyway, but somehow created a site where it was possible to create a dependency graph of different materials. I have some more thoughts on this, but basically the idea is, here are little capsules, and it might just be, a subset of a PowerPoint deck. So you say, here is a snapshot of the deck, and slides 22 to 25 teach this idea in a particular context. And this would be good for you if you already know these things. And it also prepares you to learn these other things. And people could then, if we have this out there, people could get a sense of how they could navigate through this graph, and they could upvote and downvote whether, given that they already know the prerequisites, this was actually useful to them.
That's a great point. And I think it ties into some of the conversations we've had, is that of course there's a risk that this just becomes a mess, that it just like this long list of things. And, a lot of the times, well, lots of different kinds of people could potentially draw on this, but it may be someone who is maybe teaching NLP for the first time, or after a period of some years, or what have you. And so having some kind of organization to that would be incredibly helpful.
So I think one nice thing to do is to have shared documents that, whether that's Wiki or Google Doc or whatever, that allow people to curate. But I think this idea of allowing people to upvote and downvote different stuff, or at least say, I am using this one.
Right. No,
and leave back and leave comments for, this one was particularly useful to me because it was visually beautiful, because my students are not very good programmers and this one holds their hand, whatever it is, that if you're the night before a lecture and you're trying to find something that's useful, right. Having some way of being able to see which ones have been recently used and why.
No, I think that's very true. And there were a number of the teaching materials. I mean, we had several types of teaching materials. Some were maybe assignments, basically, but others were essentially slide decks. There was one, for example, very nice one, kind of a way to handle ethics, which I know for many people is very intimidating. And so I think there was a lot of interest expressed in that. There were a number of comments here in the, and Ada mentions that it seems like the Teaching NLP workshop happens when there's a paradigm shift. It's sort of, yeah. But maybe there needs to be a more regular pattern. Barbara, are you still here? I know you're one of our friends in Europe.
Yes, I am. Sorry, yes, I am. I'm here. I'm listening.
Wonderful. Do you want to say a little bit about your comment?
I was just, when Jason had this idea now of making this graph about concepts and slides, I thought it's like a meta graph over NLP courses that you can construct in a way, maybe like these textbooks have sometimes, these chapter guides.
Yeah,
I envision
that's right.
it like this, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so basically the idea is we would want to list a lot of topics, and whether we draw the graph or not, the note on transformers, for example, basically people could answer how they teach transformers, and it would be in a structured form where they say, okay, how do you motivate it? Well, we lead in from this other thing or this problem. And so how do you, what do you have to teach before, you know, if you were to move this unit around, with your way of teaching it, wouldn't you be able to move it before? You need these other things first. And so these nodes are, you know, wiki pages or something. So, you know, you can imagine a teaching wiki where every, actually, that's not quite right. Because my way of teaching transformers is different from yours. And so they're like different nodes.
Yeah, right. It's kind of
you
a
know,
super
your way of
graph,
teaching
right?
ones has different prerequisites from mine. And because they're both called transformers, then we can get a sense for everybody where when you take this metagraph of what everybody's prerequisite, you know, which things are popular prerequisites or motivations.
Right.
The controlled vocabulary that makes it possible to unify these graphs across different courses. And then there's a question of like who's in charge of controlling the vocabulary.
Right. I could see this graph as like your views, right? You could even have like different views on this graph based on your views of classes even. So I really like this idea of it, this kind of visualization of concepts and the ordering on, or giving ideas on how to reorder maybe things in content in classes.
Yeah, and then there's some inheritance where, you know, I steal your stuff, and then I post up, you know, a child node of your node where I forked your slides.
So I think Verada, you posted a little note here that you have apparently been solving this problem as we've been talking. You said you created a demo. Yeah, this is great, Verada.
No,
would you like to
solving it? I just
just
simple thing for this.
Do you want to show what?
Sure.
You want to show what you were thinking about here?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess yeah, this dependency graph and those ideas are great. Just that I think they are at this point maybe it's they are difficult to build. So I just thought that maybe one way to go with this is right now is just for different topics, because we saw that different topics can be taught in many different contexts. So sometimes we need to teach these topics to people who don't have much background in math. So resources with less math. So for if you take say teaching embeddings, then how do you teach it with less math, then more math, maybe applications, advanced topics related to embeddings, and ethics related to embeddings. So for each topic, we can combine all these resources, and we can just, for now, we can put links for them. I don't know, any thoughts?
I think you're right that it's important to start somewhere. And I know this came up in a number of, who said this? I can't remember when it came up, but like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, which is an old expression. And this is actually the Jupyter book that we've been referring you to for our schedule.
Right, and then we can also search, because in Jupyter book you can search for things, which is nice. In websites, it's not that easy to do.
That's true. And I think Margot had a related thought about the demo here. Margot, do you want to share that?
Actually, it's also that, so one of the things that we thought when we designed this workshop was that we want to have people from all different backgrounds, or teaching NLP in different backgrounds. And I think it would be also interesting, especially for this imaginary person that tries to draw up an NLP course for the first time, to also, when you see material, to know, okay, this worked for CS students, this did not work for humanities students, and to get sort of pointers on what to actually use to put a course together based on the background where they're teaching.
Right. I think that's been an important theme both the students and their backgrounds, their motivations, their prerequisite knowledge. That seems in many